Yep.
My husband's like, oh, is this what we're doing? I'm like, it is.
Yep.
It is. It's going to be brilliant. You just don't worry about that. Okay. I'm just making sure we're coming up here. Yay. Welcome, everybody, to today's Eat and Greet. It's such a pleasure to have each and every one of you. And today we're going to talk about Chiron. And some of you may know a lot about Chiron. Some of you may be just getting your introduction. Either way, this talk is well built and well suited for you. And we have a friend over who is just going to light this placement, this beautiful energy up for us today. So Felina, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me, Stormie.
Yes, and Felina and I both brought cat cups today. It
Right.
wasn't even planned.
We didn't plan this.
This is so good. I've got the Leo cup. So Team Leo, go ahead and light up the chat box. They will. If I do anything Leo, I feel like the Leos just come in like full force and they're like, yeah.
They love it. Yeah. And I've got the I love my cat cup. Yep. And at the bottom after I finish drinking, it says #1 cat mom. So and I also have my cat, one of my cats behind me here. Zen is sleeping. Her name is Zen, and she's very zen right now.
So this is perfect. I feel like for whatever reason, the cat vibe, the feline vibe is high today. So
that's my name. You know, that's right.
That's right. That's right. All right, guys. So a little housekeeping before we jump in and get our talk underway is we've had a full week of Eat and Greet. So hopefully you've had a chance or you get a chance going through the weekend to go through and listen to everybody who's come this week. We had Arlen, we had Robert, we've had Spencer yesterday, Felina's today. Now, good news too. If you cannot take YouTube with you, all of the talks will be uploaded to the podcast as well. So you can take us with you in your bathtub. It'll be so good. So you have an opportunity to never miss one of these talks and do the learning with us. Now, next week, we've got Brian Coulter coming back. We're going to talk about the eclipse and the solstice that's coming up. David Cochran, Sam Reynolds will be here. And in the middle of the week, we have got a free talk over at astrologyhub.com. checking out what's going on for the next 6 months of the year. How are we finishing out the year? What are the transits? What are the major players that are coming to the table? So come and check it out. The link will be in the description box down below, along with all of Felina's contact information. Check out her work, her beautiful art. I just have to say this. Every time I see your art, I feel like there's like a goddess happening and I should just take off my clothes. I'm like, I need to just be here with Felina's artwork and be naked. I'm just channeling my goddess energy. So I don't know why if that's on purpose, but it's beautiful. So if you guys haven't seen it, yeah, check it out. I mean,
thank you. Most of the art that I post is not actually mine, but I always put credit to whose it is. It's just art that really resonates with me. And yeah, it has kind of this goddess feel, right? So
yeah. So check out the art, you guys. Get naked or not, that's optional, of course, but you know, do you. That's what right. I'll say to that. Awesome. We've got some people lighting up the charts or the chat already. So they're welcoming you, Felina. So I think we are ready to go. Let's talk about Chiron. And we're also going to address today, you guys, the fact that Chiron is heading into retrograde as well. And what does that mean? How do we work with that energy as well? So, Felina, lead us in here. Chiron.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I was born with Chiron right on my ascendant in Taurus. So it's kind of, I have this Chiron wounded healer embodiment, going on. And so it was almost like I really had to kind of zoom in and figure out what that energy was for me. And so right now we have Chiron and Aries, and Chiron spends most of his time in Aries because of a very unusual orbit. And so it's about 8 or 9 years in Aries. And then on the flip side of that, in Libra, it spends about roughly 2 years. So it's very right around Pisces and Aries. That's where the big Chiron lessons seem to be, right? And so we've kind of been in the thick of those. And yeah, so who is Chiron? And the Greek pronunciation, which we pronounce it Chiron because that is just much simpler, right? But the Greek pronunciation is Chiron, right? Chiron. And so his wife, which is another celestial body, is named after his wife, which we call Chariklo, and that would be Hariklo. So that's how to pronounce it, and really comes from Chiron comes from the Greek word for hands, right? So, and we were just talking about how Stormie and I, we use our hands to talk sometimes, maybe especially Stormie does.
Yes. Aware that my ancestry is Italian.
Right. Yes. So there is something about the hands with it as well, especially right now. There's this coming up, like, what are we doing with our hands? Are we using them as weapons of wounding or expressions of healing? So that kind of it comes up with Chiron sometimes. But Chiron, some of the archetypes that go along with Chiron, we've heard of, wounded healer, right? I like to call Chiron the cosmic shaman. And he has a lot to do with the holistic healing process, not necessarily the cure, not necessarily a medical thing, but the healing, the process of healing. He was a teacher and a mentor, so that is also part of that medicine. And he's also a threshold guide, or like a rites of passage facilitator. So in one of the last interviews that I did, we were talking about rites of passage, and we are in one right now. Everything we're experiencing here, this is a rite of passage. It's a long one, right? But we are in the thick of it. And Chiron is, facilitating that healing journey we're going through as we go through the liminal stages of what we're experiencing, where we're leaving something behind, we're separating from it, and we're moving into something else that we don't really know yet. And Chiron is kind of a support for that. So in shamanic circles, we talk about the hollow bone. And so Chiron is very much like the hollow bone, or a conduit of many things, spiritual healing, conduit of light, conduit of whatever it is that we need in order to go through the process of healing. And his orbit is in between Uranus and Saturn. So Saturn is the limit of what we can see, although that's kind of debatable, because for a little bit in Uranus's retrograde orbit, we might be able to see Uranus, right? A little peak. But then, so Saturn is like the physical, right? The boundaries of our physical reality. And then beyond that, we have Uranus as, it's kind of like stepping into the metaphysical. So then Chiron becomes this conduit between the physical and the metaphysical. Like a bridge between ordinary and non-ordinary reality is another kind of shamanic way that we might say it. As shamanic practitioners, which is something that I've been doing for over a decade now. In shamanic practice, we're in between worlds, in between what we know here as ordinary reality, which is the Saturn constructs, right? And stepping into, into the non-ordinary reality. or the like shamanic state of consciousness, it's also called. And so Chiron does that. He's a walker between worlds, right? And so he brings like a synthesis between Saturn constructs and reality, and Uranus, metaphysical, non-ordinary reality. And then another part of Chiron is that he's an exile. He's an outcast. He's outside of his own herd, you know, outside of the herd of, in his mythic storyline, the centaurs. He is a centaur, but he's not like other centaurs, you know. You're right. He's the centaurs were kind of known as this group that was just raucous and, you know, got crazy with things, all that. Anyway, he was more reserved, and he was more of a teacher, you know. But he was born of Kronos, or Saturn. So Saturn's like his dad. And a sea nymph named Felina. And so he has, you know, so he's a demigod. He's not just a centaur, he's a demigod. And when we come to the wounded healer part of Chiron, we often know in his mythic storyline that there's this, you know, time later in life where one of his students, Heracles or Hercules, accidentally hits him in the, usually it's said to be the knee or somewhere in the leg, with an arrow dipped in the blood of the Hydra, which is poisonous, you know. And so that is said to be his wound, and yet that's not his original wound. Yeah, so Chiron in our chart talks about our original wound. That's what Chiron is about in the chart, the original wound, whatever that may be. Chiron's original wound was really being abandoned by his parents. You know, his mother thought he was a monster. His dad was not there for him. He was abandoned. And yet there's also a gift within the wound. You know, we all have our wounding, and then going through the healing process of that wound, and what that wound brings up for us in our life, we often find, or we have the potential to find, I should say, the gift of that. Why, you know, we often question, why do I have to have this wound, whatever it is? Why did I have to go through this experience or this trauma or whatever? And then we find it later, or we have the potential to find it, why we actually did, you know, what that has taught us, and how oftentimes we end up helping others to heal through something, you know, through a similar wound, because we've had that experience, you know. So, and that's kind of what Chiron's medicine is about. He's so, as this outcast, because he's not really accepted by the centaurs necessarily. He's definitely not accepted by his parents, right? And his divinity, the divinity side of him. He's kind of in between worlds. So here we have that theme again. And so there's this kind of maverick nature to him. He just doesn't fit in, you know. And his original wound is about separation, and that's really what all of our wounds are about. Sure. Whether it be, you know, separation from God, or feeling separate from, you know, our community, or just feeling outside of something. And it's an illusion, you know. Separation is an illusion, but it's also part of the healing process to come back to wholeness, right? So that's what the Chiron process is about. And it's a long process, because we don't reach our Chiron return until we're around 50 years old, right?
Yeah.
Stormie and I are not quite there yet.
Not yet, but moving towards slowly.
Yeah. Yeah. And so ahead of that time, so it's the same for everybody when the Chiron return happens, 49 to 51, we'll say. And yet all of the other aspects that Chiron makes with our natal Chiron, those vary wildly, you know. It's a very personal journey. For example, my Chiron half return, when Chiron, transiting Chiron was opposite my natal Chiron, that was when I was 16 and a half. So it would have been about the same for you, Stormie, because we're very close in age. We're about a month apart, less than a month. And then, you know, for my daughter, she won't even reach her, she's 14 right now. She won't even reach her half return until she's 36, you know, so it varies, the process of what we go through in that healing process.
In that, what was your half return like?
What was my half return like? There was this opening into other worlds for me. I remember at that time, two of my best friends were foreign exchange students, and just learning about different cultures. You know, I grew up in small town Iowa. That was necessary for me. I needed that, because throughout my life I had been searching for something. I've always been kind of a spiritual person, not knowing what that meant. My family didn't really go to church or anything. I ended up going with friends to their various churches, not really liking any of them, the churches and what they were kind of talking about, because I always had questions there that never got answered, you know. But, you know, around my half return, I was really exploring outside of that box of small town Iowa, learning about different cultures was really important for me. Opened me up quite a bit into kind of, well, who I am now. So that was kind of it was a fulcrum point in my healing journey, I believe. Yeah.
That's awesome. It's always awesome to hear like when we look back, what the experiences were, you know, to see kind of how it led. I mean, I know for me, when that would have been happening for me, oh man, I can just put my finger on it. And I have so much relationship work to do in this lifetime. And that was a most pronounced physical, in this life, material, very torn relationship. And it was the game changer of a moment. Yeah. And it was a spiritual experience in the work. You know, it was just like, but like you said, I was somehow different. I was just opened. And then, you know, the rest of the learning got to go from there. I got Saturnian real fast though, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, there was some definite relationship work as well for me. I didn't go into that part, but there was some like opening of new worlds for me as well around that time.
Yeah, I was just like, I'll be naked. That was like really my response.
I love that. You know, another thing that Chiron brings up, it's this energy of being charismatic, but also humble. It's not like, it's charisma that kind of draws others toward you, but not because, you know, you're so like out there or vibrant or whatever it is. It's almost like this, it's this parenting kind of, and not in a, you know, do this, do that kind of way, but just this nurturing kind of vibe. And that's really what Chiron kind of found out is the gift within his own wound of being separate, and being abandoned by his parents, is that, you know, Apollo ended up kind of taking him on, as his own, adopting him in a way and teaching him all he knows, which is interesting. I mean, Greek mythology has its own weird timing and stuff, because Apollo would really be Chiron's nephew, but essentially he was kind of a father figure for Chiron. And then, so Chiron ended up being like that for Achilles and Heracles and, Jason and
Yeah.
Asclepius, who became a healer himself. So,
And he gave some of them just the gifts of actual healing, surgery, medicine, things like that. So what we think of in traditional healing, and other ones not so much, but still in the healing realm. But I always thought that was interesting, that is like some were the actual gifts of just medicine, but the gift of music is nothing to be overlooked either.
yeah, I mean, yeah, there were many things that he taught. It wasn't just healing. He was also an astrologer, so that's one thing. And he also taught warfare.
And hunting, I was going to say hunting, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, he was taking these, his students through their rites of passage. What is it that they're becoming, right? Is this, going through these kind of coming of age things with these different students? Who are they meant to be? And what can how can I help them facilitate this journey from, from not knowing these things into being, known for these things. Right.
Sure. Well, and it's like, I feel like in the chart, when we're looking at it, it's this place that brings the awareness to what is the harm, and that kind of becomes the turning point of how can we take it forward. Because if you can't kind of identify, it's harder to allow the healing to take place, especially, oh my gosh, right now where the world is quite confusing. The word I don't know is pretty good right now, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you're sitting out there and you've got your charts, you want to look for the sign to kind of tell you how that wound has gotten there, right? And the planets are going to tell you what kind of wound that in, and then your house will tell you a little bit where. And then of course you bring in your aspects to see, are you going to have an easier time, a harder time? Where are your helpers, so that you can come to the awareness of it? Because that's the turning point. Once you begin to know, I think some work can get done.
Yeah, absolutely. And with looking at your own soul compass or natal chart, when you look at the sign, find out who's the ruler of that sign,
Mm-hmm.
because they are almost like a mentor for your healing process, right? So Stormie and I were born with Chiron and Taurus. So we have Venus as that mentor, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Taurus, the wound there it's about self-worth. There's some deep wounding surrounding self-worth and, our own value.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I've been going through this process of trying to even understand what I'm worth, as an astrologer. People for the longest time, they were like, you need to be charging more. And then I would up it, and you still need to be charging more. I never knew what I was worth. I never understood that. And I had to kind of, go through this process of learning that through kind of this reflection from others, because I have my moon opposite my Chiron. Moon in Scorpio in the 7th house is saying, it's giving me this reflection toward my own wounding, So, and yeah, for other people, those of you who are born, let's see, when was, I think it was, yeah, from 1969 to 1977, roughly around that time, you would be Chiron and Aries. And so you're, you know, coming up on your own Chiron return. So, you know, Chiron and Aries, Chiron spends so much time in Aries because it's very important that we get that right. That healing process is about our identity, you know.
Mhm.
So, and that is what we're dealing with right now on the collective level. Um, this, you know, humanity's identity. How have we been, you know, identified in the past, and how is that not working anymore? And, you know, that is what this is about. Um, you know, that's part of it, I should say. There's a lot that goes into it. There's many other transits that are all part of this. A lot of the upset and the, you know, upheaval of things and the big transformations, those are really coming from Eris in Aries, square Pluto in Capricorn. That one's a huge one, and that's what's bringing a lot of this up that we're feeling, where, you know, Eris energy, that's another energy that is the uninvited or the not, you know, the pushed aside. And yeah, she's a little bit more wrathful about that feeling, right? Than Chiron.
Like less subtle and much more willing to have a vengeance about it.
Right.
So that's okay. Sometimes you gotta have that.
That's right. Yeah. And that is part of it. But yeah, with Chiron and Aries, this is a long process. It'll be, so that was 2018 when Chiron entered Aries, and then around 2027, I think, we'll be moving into, you know, our time, the Chiron and Taurus, where we're coming full circle with that healing process. Um, but yeah, those of you who have Chiron and Aries, you're really feeling the, like, who am I wound, right? And where it is in your houses, in your soul compass, that's really going to tell you how, you know, where it plays out in your life. You know, I was saying that I have mine conjunct the ascendant, so it's in my first house, and it's very much about my identity as well. But then, you know, for other people, it might be in the seventh house, and you have that wounding with relationships.
Mhm.
So depending on where it is, you'll see the various themes coming up that have to do with your original wound and the kind of healing process that you're going through in this life.
Yeah, right now, that is traveling through my eighth house.
Okay, so transiting Chiron is traveling through your eighth house,
Yes.
bringing up all the deep stuff.
Yeah, which has, I will tell you, this particular round of whatever the deep stuff has been down there has been greeted with a lot more grace on my behalf, mostly because I think we have the gift of as humans to keep aging
Mhm.
and get an opportunity to see that the motion between the worlds is just the motion between the worlds. So whatever comes up, it's okay.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, because there is something to do with Saturn with Chiron. I mean, Chiron and Saturn and Uranus, this is all kind of a combination within our chart that's very important to look into and see what the aspects are, and all of that. And so Saturn, that's about, you know, coming into your responsibility. We have our Saturn return right around 2930, you know, 29 and a half. And so we have to go through that maturation process before we come to that full circle of healing. You know, and so as we go through our healing process with more Saturn maturation, we'll say, it does become a little bit easier to work with it. It doesn't mean that it become, you know, necessarily easier as like everything's better, but
Right.
you know,
Oh no.
right. Then when that stuff comes up, you kind of have a more mature outlook on, you know, what's actually going on, and maybe more tools in your medicine bag to
Yeah.
use there. Um, yeah. So when we get to our Chiron return, I should say this: it's not like, I mean, we have a choice. We have a choice throughout this whole healing process of our life. If we are going to look into the wound and, you know, try to heal it, or if we're going to avoid it and we're going to try to escape the wound. There's various ways we can work with the wound, and some are better than others. You know, a lot of people want to escape that wound because it's painful. Like, there's no sugar coating that Chiron brings up some painful wounds, you know, especially for people who have been through traumatic experiences.
Yeah.
So, and yet, in order to bring back that fragmented soul piece that you know leaves us during trauma to protect us, you know, uh, it's like a kind of a shamanic understanding of it. But when we talk about soul loss, it's not like the whole soul is gone. It's like a piece fragments off, and goes elsewhere, you know, in non-ordinary reality, like we're talking about with Uranus. And it may come back, or it may always just, you know, stay there unless we go to retrieve it, if we go to find it, or we have a soul retrieval from, you know, a shamanic practitioner or something like that. Or therapy can often help, you know, as well, bring those fragmented soul pieces back. And so then we can come to wholeness. But a lot of times we either, you know, if we go through some very difficult trauma, we either don't remember, you know, it's like, you know, there's some memory loss around that. And so we don't even know that that was part of our experience until it kind of comes up later. Oftentimes it'll just spontaneously come up to us. Or we remember it and it was so brutal that we don't want to go back there.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, yeah, so the pain of going back there and trying to retrieve something from there to reintegrate it for our healing, it's difficult. It's not just like, okay, today I'm gonna go find my lost soul piece and bring all that trauma back up, and it's some serious work. But Chiron is there to help us, and those planets that are, you know, in good relationship with Chiron in our chart, they are facilitators of that healing as well.
Mm-hmm.
When you have hard aspects with Chiron, that often shows kind of the nature of what that pain is, what that trauma might have been, or what that wounding, the story surrounding that wounding. So.
And it almost seems like in some of the Chiron work, if you can get next to a Chiron buddy, you kind of get a battle buddy where it's almost like, you know, a burden shared is half a burden, that statement. And I don't know how many times, just through my own practice, where it's like if something is hard or I'm lost in it, if I will help someone who's lost as well, we both seem to find our way to the light.
Yes.
You know, and it's like I can't tell some people about certain traumas. I have not experienced it, but they can talk to each other and magic happens, healing happens.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So I always feel like in the Chiron energy, I think there are just these times where it's like, find your battle buddy, because if you'll say that thing, then you give them permission to say that thing or to have not learned that lesson. And there is grace between the two of you. Or
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what being a wounded healer is about. I mean, it's part of, you know, it's part of your own healing process as you're helping others to heal, right? And yeah, just like, you know, going through the Me Too movement, it was like many of us needed others to open up that dialogue, you know, so we could go there and bring out this acknowledgement, like shine a light on the wound of, you know, whatever kind of sexual issue from our past, you know, needed to come out. And yeah, it was very healing process for so many of us. And yeah, I remember I opened up about something that happened to me when I was very young. At the time I wrote about it, my daughter was already older than I was when it happened to me. And it was something that I had never really talked about.
Sure.
And, you know, after that, I was writing as Mother Earth, doing her own Me Too about what all that has happened to her. You know, it was just very, it was a very, it was like, yeah, like the battle buddy thing that you're talking about. Like we had to have that support. It's very crucial when we're going through rites of passage or healing journeys to have support. After I do something like a soul retrieval for clients, or even before, I make sure that they have some support either at home or, you know, for afterwards, because integrating what returns is so crucial, so important to the healing. It's not just like a bam, you know, this everything's better. You really have to nurture that soul piece that returns. And so having, you know, being in a non-supportive atmosphere is not the best situation for going through that kind of healing.
Sure.
So, you know, I'm always, you know, one of those people who sees people through their integration period, but it's good to have somebody at home too who's like your buddy, you know, somebody who's gonna help
Yeah.
you comes up.
Yeah. And I think it's like, you know, in all of this work, just the understanding, like you said, that just because you get it back doesn't mean that you know how it works, how you feel with it. None of that. You know, we can look at animals who have been hurt and they come back to healing and that, and they're skittish, you know, right? They've been hurt for so long that they adapted to knowing how to be hurt, not how to be well. Being well is, you know, you meditate your eyeballs off, but if you don't know how to be well with those pieces that come back, that's still a practice. And it is tender, I think, for each of us. So this is, we get into the tender work down here, the underbelly.
The underbelly of it, yes, absolutely. So what I was kind of getting at with talking about the Chiron return is that it's not like, you know, we turn 50 and then suddenly we're, you know, at the end of our healing journey. Right? Often sometimes something comes up during that time. It's kind of like in Chiron's mythic storyline when he eventually gets, you know, the poison arrow in his leg, you know, and it's like the wound returns to be really understood, really worked through. And I'm not saying, you know, everybody gets to 50 years old and then they're going to have some health issue, because
Right.
it's not always, you know, a physical thing. Oftentimes it's on the soul level, and that can kind of spiral into like mental, emotional, physical, right? It's very much a soul level thing with Chiron. Um, and so the kind of healing that needs to be done then is really going into the soul level of what does this mean within my soul, you know, my personal journey, my soul journey, and you know, the kind of manifestations that it's having, maybe physically or mentally or emotionally. Those are sort of like symptoms, and you can kind of see then, you know, as you're going through this healing process and understanding the wound and understanding how to heal from that, you can kind of see how it then manifests on different levels of your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I could for myself, I can see throughout my life, I can see the physical very easily. You know, we have Chiron and Taurus, so it's a very physical kind of sign. I can see how my wounding has translated in my physical body, when I was very little, I had just something that doctors couldn't even really understand, or, didn't even, and it was with my ankle, on my right leg. And they ended up calling it a septic joint, but it was weird because I was very little, and I think I was like 5, I can't remember exactly, but we were walking, near the park. It was like a big 4th of July celebration thing, and I just like fell down and I couldn't walk. And so, I was in the hospital for a while, and they were trying to figure this thing out. So that was like the initial thing. And then I had issues with my knee on the same leg. So here it is, like very specific Chiron on my ascendant. Here I have a leg issue, right? Knees and joints, bones, skin, all those things, because I have Saturn in an inconjunct to my Chiron. So, and I'm guessing yours is pretty close to that as well. And so, skin and bones, that's kind of like Saturn's domain, right? The structures of our body. And so those things were always kind of physically what I was dealing with, and I still kind of am, so in various ways. And it would come up that maybe that might be healed, and then another thing would come up very similar. So, you can see things come up physically. You can see how emotional things may be like a pattern. Okay. And so oftentimes those emotional patterns that really kind of mess with your life, or they're really painful, those have something to do with the wound as well. The mental patterns, the thoughts like, I'm going to screw this up, or I'm not good enough. That's often a Virgo kind of manifestation of the wound, where I'm just not quite right, and I need to be, better or perfect, or whatever.
Just perfect would be
that would be fine, right? Yeah. So
yeah. So we've got transiting Chiron out there moving around doing his thing, and he's preparing now to go retrograde for us. So what does this mean, and what can we kind of expect to see as he is moving backwards?
Yeah, so Chiron stations retrograde on July 11th, so about a month from now, pretty much exactly a month from now. And at that time, Chiron will be conjunct Moon and Mars. Yeah, so and also in a third and final sextile with Venus and Gemini, which we're in right now. So I wrote about it today on Facebook. Right now we're in the second of 3 Chiron. Venus retrograde is sextile with Chiron. It's a very beautiful, it's like a good rapport between the divine feminine and the cosmic shaman, to open us up to some heart healing. And the first one was April 10th. That happened to be my solar return. So I have that signature throughout my whole year, which is great. And then this one's the second one where it's retrograde, where Venus is retrograde, and it's internal, right? More internal, really figuring out what that heart opening is for us. And then it'll happen again right around the same time that Chiron stations retrograde. So when Chiron or any of the outer planets station retrograde, it's not as noticeable necessarily as like a Mercury station or a Venus station, because those are personal, those are close, and the outer planets, they're kind of retrograde about half the time anyway. So I mean, like half a year. But especially if it's transiting something in your chart, it's like right on, let's say it's not right on your ascendant, or it's on your midheaven, or it's on some personal planet for you or something, that you're gonna feel it. You're gonna feel that station, because it'll be a slow down and like focus on whatever that part of your chart is. So it will be in the 926 Aries when it stations retrograde. So wherever 926 Aries is in your chart, that is going to be where that focus of the healing is going to be. You know, and you said yours, you know, Chiron is transiting in your 8th house, right? Yeah, mine's in the 12th. So, you know, whatever house, that's going to show, you know, where the healing process is coming up for you. So it'll be important to look at the house. And, you know, when we have that slowdown and the focus that a retrograde station brings, what we're doing is we are shifting our perspective of whatever that planet, or, you know, in Chiron's case, is known as a minor planet, or, you know, various names. But you know, for our purposes, we'll call Chiron a planet, okay? Wherever that planet is focusing, it's shifting the perspective on what that planet's about. So Chiron is about the healing process. Chiron is about the wound. Chiron is about recovering from the illusion of separation. And what the world has been experiencing this year, it's been a whole lot of separation in many different ways, you know, from the whole COVID thing and everybody's isolated, right? To all that has come up surrounding police brutality and our racial identities. You know, here's Aries again with, you know, bringing up the wound of identity. And you know, those separations are becoming very stark, and we're supposed to focus in on them, and we're going to shift our perspective with Chiron about how to heal that. And you know, ideas are already coming up as we, you know, approach this time. How can we heal this this issue? And you know, I'm speaking to our own country here.
Sure.
But there are issues for others in other countries as well.
Well, and this is quite national. I think we are, as a country, our identity in general is in some question. We are heading towards our Pluto return. So, you know, in our own ways, we do certainly have these questions going on. Where is the voice, the independent, expressive voice of the United States? That's a thing.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Who are we? And who we are is transforming, because we are going through a long process of a Pluto return, like you're saying. So this is a transformational process. This is a rite of passage, and here's Chiron to help us through that. You know, so Chiron is going to, you know, if we're working with Chiron, because we have the choice, we don't have to, but in my opinion, maybe we should, right? Not everybody uses Chiron in astrology, you know, just like Eris, you know.
You're missing out.
I know, that's what I think too. But, you know, to each his own. And yes, we're gonna need that healing, that support, that battle buddy, like you said, to go through that. And so to have Chiron illuminating the gift within our wounds right now is really important, to understand why we're going through this, what is being illuminated, and why that is the healing medicine that we need. You know, no matter how painful it is, no matter how uncomfortable, like we have to go there so that we can get through it and we can transform in this larger process. Because otherwise we're just in the goo of the chrysalis and we don't form the wings. We need to, you know, we need to get those imaginal cells going so that we can become what we are becoming.
Yeah. Man, aren't we becoming?
Yeah.
Yeah. We are in the process of becoming what's next. What a trip.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. And it's very, we have Mars coming up, eventually. Right now, where we are, Mars is, coming up on a Neptune conjunction in Pisces. So it's a very kind of confusing, like, I need to do something. That's Mars.
But
but I don't know what it is. That's Neptune, and it's okay not to know. Really, what this sextile that we're going through 3 times with Venus and Chiron is about listening. It's not, that's the action right now. It's about listening, and listening to the heart of humanity. That's what the collective part of it is about, and also listening to your own heart for that personal piece of what it is that we each need to do. Because there's a lot of square energy saying, like, we got to do something. This is necessary action that needs to happen, and yet there's confusion surrounding it with Neptune. But then what we're coming into is a strong period of Mars in Aries, in this sign that we're talking about, where Chiron, where the wound is and where the healing is. And that's, Mars is in Aries. When does that happen? That's not too long from now, I think.
yeah, I think we had
At the end of the month.
What month is it? Are we in June? We had in June.
Yeah, it's June. I think it's June 27th, somewhere around there, that Mars goes into Aries. And then later on, I think it's in September when that Mars retrograde happens.
September.
So Mars is going to be in Aries for a long time. During that process, Mars is going to come conjunct Chiron. And so there's this, Mars can bring up the fight, right? And conjunct Chiron, it's like the need to, like, go to battle with what that wound is bringing up, with the trauma that is so systemic in our society, battling that trauma. And Mars is, battle ready in Aries. And that is July 14th, when that's exact, with Mars conjunct Chiron. So, we're coming into a time where, even though right now there's some confusion around everything, there is going to be a lot more clarity on where we need to focus that energy of healing coming soon. So, sit in your confusion. It's okay to not know, and just listen for what, listen for how to respond,
Yeah. Oh man, it's a lot, and it's like it's a blistering time of information. We're still Venus retrograde in Gemini, so sorting out even the value of information, which the best way we do that is by listening for what is fact, and having to just sit and be still and know that the moment of the appropriate word, action, whatever, will present itself. And as individuals, each of us will know. You will know when it is your time to move or not to, but not if we won't stop and listen, Breathe in the vibe for a minute. And it's weird. This is super weird. Really, I don't know is like, it is really the phrase right now. It's like, well, I don't know. I think, but I don't know.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of I don't know. Yeah, and your dog agrees.
He's like, I don't know them. They obviously aren't allowed to walk outside ever.
That's right.
Yes. Felina, thank you so much for coming to talk to us. You guys, I hope you've loved this. I hope this gives you some insight, some things to think about. Definitely, I love things that make you go grab your chart. So grab your chart. Pacha wants you to get your chart. He's my only employee. So, we have a thing.
His name is Pacha?
Yes.
I love it.
Yes, and we just adopted another dog today, and his name is Brody.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, so we'll he's bigger than I am, I think. So we'll see.
Some sixth house, small animals energy coming up for you, huh?
Well, it is coming up for my husband.
Oh, for your husband,
His
yeah.
beautiful Aries energy, and he is just. We've been looking for a dog, and I said, you know what? I know the day is going to come. He's going to walk in here, and we're going to have a new dog, and I'm set.
Good,
And
good.
yeah,
Oh, yeah. And they have such great healing medicine. I love dog medicine. Obviously, I love cat medicine too. Um, yeah. You know, are we out of time?
no, go ahead.
Oh, there was just a few things that I forgot to mention about the discovery of Chiron, because Chiron was discovered in 1977. And around that discovery, there were things that came up of political martyrdom that were right around that time. So like Steve Biko in I think that's how you pronounce his last name, in South Africa with the anti-apartheid movement, and then Harvey Milk in the U.S. was assassinated around that time. So political martyrdom, along with Chiron, there's something there. And then also around that time, there was this child, David Vedder, and he, for the first time in his life, right around that time of Chiron's discovery, because this kid had what's called severe combined immune deficiency, right? But for the first time in his life, he was able to walk um, for the first time outside of his isolation, his little isolation bubble, with the help of a germ-free suit that was made by NASA. It was called a mobile isolator system, right? And so that, you know, disabilities and things of that nature, coming really into being able to be talked about, because disability for a long time, it was just like kind of ignored, as Chiron was, because Chiron was discovered in 1977, but once discovered, they realized, oh, there's Chiron, and here we were taking pictures of Chiron, and all the way back in, we were seeing it in the 1800s. So Chiron was there all along. We just didn't realize. And it's kind of like that. It brings up these issues that we kind of just don't look at, and that we should, right? So I just wanted to put that out there, that those two things are kind of, there's something with that, with Chiron, because when a planet is discovered, you often look at the discovery time to see, what happened around that time, what kind of things were coming up. Yeah, there was some of that that was very obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rejected out in public. Poor Chiron.
Right. Yeah.
Even in the astronomical community.
Yeah. Yeah. And painful rejections, and yet, what did Chiron do? He used his magic. He used what he had. He used his experience of rejection and his experience of wounding and his experience of being separate from everybody else to help others, you know, come into um, their own healing, right?
Yeah. Well, and if you've ever seen Percy Jackson, the movie, Pierce Brosnan plays Chiron, and I died. I love him and that little accent, and then he had a half body, and I was like, I can't. It's too good.
So funny. Yeah, my daughter loves those books, and so we have watched those. Yeah.
Oh, so if you haven't, friends, Percy Jackson, even Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, which I actually think they changed actors in the second one, but just watch the first one, it's worth it.
Okay.
I don't know if that'll help you with your wounds, but it's nice to look at,
It's nice to look at. Right? If you love Pierce Brosnan, you'll love Pierce Brosnan as Chiron.
Yes, you will.
That's something to walk away with. Yep.
Felina, thank you so much for coming over. This has been brilliant. And you guys, as always, I will make sure all of Felina's details are in the description box down below. If you've got Chiron questions or you just want to follow Felina, I'm telling you, got to go check out this artwork. It'll all be absolutely down there. And I'm sure sometime, Felina, if you'd like to, we'd love to have you back.
Oh, I love it. Yes. I love talking with you. You're so much fun. And we just found out that we're right around the same age. So here we are with very similar placements. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm like pre-established battle buddy.
Right. Here we are. Battle
Yeah.
buddy.
That'll be brilliant. All right, you guys, like this video, comment, share, subscribe. If you're listening on the podcast, definitely give it a star, give it a thumbs up. And I look forward to seeing you next week for our next set of eat and greets as we continue to talk about astrology and how you can use your astrology to have a little bit of grace out in your world. All right, you guys, I love you. Bye.